Hey, I'm Hunt, and this is Hunt on LSU, your channel for LSU Fighting Tiger football talk. Enjoy the video. We want you to leave a comment below, hit that like button, and subscribe right below the video. Enjoy. Welcome in. Hunt Palmer coming to you from the Mercedes-Benz Baton Rouge studio downtown in the capital city on this Thursday. We're starting to work towards the weekend here on 104.5 ESPN Baton Rouge. Appreciate you hanging out with us. Scott Jacob Beck and Jordan Kitchens back there on the ones and twos. Sometimes I think there can be some repetitiveness on these airwaves if you're talking about us having 3 hours in the morning and then 2 hours at lunch and then 2 hours midday and then 3 hours on after further review. You're talking about 10 hours of daily coverage here in the Baton Rouge market. And sometimes we talk about the same thing. And I'm not going to do a lot of that. We're going to do some things as far as the local teams are concerned, not the biggest story in sports today, which is March Madness, closely followed by probably Shohei Ohtani and $4.5 million. We start with LSU football. Tigers back on the practice field this week and meeting with the media this week after a week off last week for spring break. And there have been a couple of springs under Brian Kelly where you've had a lot of continuity in the coaching staffs. He brought in Matt House, and that's who was his defensive coordinator for 2 years. He brought in Mike Denbrock, his offensive coordinator for 2 years. There was a lot of continuity going through last year's spring. And obviously this year, there's been an upset in continuity on defense, likely for the better, because LSU was a mess on defense last year for the entirety of the season. So basically an entire overhaul of that side of the football. And we've gotten a brief glimpse of some of that in the media allowed practice availability. We'll see a little bit more of that on Saturday morning when there's a full practice allotted to the media. But I think some of the best information that we can gather in this spring, where you're talking about an intensity level that's down a couple of notches, is to hear what the players have to say. And there were a couple of defensive players that spoke with the assembled media yesterday, Paris Shand as well as Greg Penn. And I was interested in some of the things that they had to say. These are guys that have worked for a number of defensive coordinators, guys in Shan's case that have been at a couple of different schools. Penn's seen some highs, seen some lows. And I was just curious as to some of the answers that they had. We spoke briefly to Michael Cobble about it yesterday, but now we have the sound. So we'll start with Greg Penn, the Tiger linebacker, who spoke to the new defensive staff and what that's been like thus far through spring football.
For me, it's a couple familiar faces because they were here my freshman year. So, it's fun. Those coaches are great. Having C-Ray back, Coach Davis is you'll see, but he's a guy, he'll get on you if you're messing up, things like that. But he's a great coach. Coach Baker, Coach Jake Austin, or Coach Olsen, all those guys are great. They're really pushing us. I think that hearing new voices has been good for guys. Being able to just play and not think as much has been really good.
I think that's very encouraging to hear. Obviously, Blake Baker having worked with Greg Penn previously is a very, very good thing. Corey Raymond is very familiar with this place, and so familiarity can do nothing but help. But obviously, the guy that is got the biggest task on his hand is Blake Baker, because he's got to overhaul this entire defense. Corey Raymond has his work cut out for him. He's got to deal with a secondary that got gashed time and time again last year. Bo Davis has his work cut out for him. They're low on numbers. But Blake Baker's got this entire defense, including his linebacker group, to worry about. So Greg Penn spoke to what the identity should be under Blake Baker.
Yeah, I think we're trying to build an identity of what we want to be. Coach Baker does a great job bringing energy to the room and to the whole defense as a whole. Us playing with fire, playing with enthusiasm, just trying to form an identity. Guys need to understand we're playing a whole new defense, so the guys are learning new plays and stuff like that.
And I there's a lot more energy and I think a more jovial personality in Blake Baker as opposed to Matt House, but that's not really of consequence to me. I've seen very, very quiet coordinators like Dave Aranda and Steve Ensminger do awesome jobs here. I've seen very loud and boisterous coaches do great jobs here. I know the end wasn't the best, and certainly what happened afterward wasn't great, but John Chavis did a really good job with LSU's defense. That guy's yelling and screaming all the time. So it doesn't it's not necessarily your demeanor doesn't have a ton to do with it. It's just how you communicate with players and how well you can call plays. So that's a little bit from Greg Penn on this new staff. But Paris Shand, who's entering his 4th year in college football, his 2nd here at LSU, talked about working with a new staff.
It's been good with working with the new staff. I feel like we're learning a lot of new things. Me specifically, I feel like I'm definitely developing a better pass rush package, working the edges, power, long arm, stuff like that. I think it's going well.
You know, Paris Shand didn't have a huge role on last year's team. He did play. It wasn't like he never got in there. But he wasn't a real impact player. And when you talk about what LSU's defensive front looks like right now, he's a guy that is going to have to play and play a lot, especially this spring when they're as low on numbers as they are. I'm more comfortable with, if you're talking about winning football games next year, winning the game in Las Vegas against USC, I'm more comfortable putting Paris Shand on the field for significant snaps than I am Dominic McKinley or Gabe Relaford. Now, that can change, and those two guys may show up here and become unblockable and have to be in there. But for the most part, asking 18 and 19-year-olds to go out there and play defensive line at the highest level is a really, really tall ask. So what's, in my opinion, a likelier scenario if LSU is going to get better play is that Jacobian Guillory and Paris Shand and Sean Washington, some of these older guys, are going to have to shoulder a bigger load than the younger players. I know they didn't have as many stars by their name in recruiting. I know they're not as exciting to talk about on message boards or Twitter, but it's just the reality. They're men in their early 20s as opposed to guys who just finished up high school. That's just the way that I see this. Now, what's going to have to change for LSU, and what I think you can get accomplished here in the spring, is a mentality shift. It makes sense if there are some guys on this defense, in this program, that are a little shook in terms of their confidence with what happened last year. That was a lot of points being scored by a lot of different teams, a lot of different ways. And it's just natural for that to kind of take a hit on your confidence. But Shand spoke to kind of the mentality that this team's got to have in the spring.
We just got to do it together. It's a total sum. It's not any individuals. It's the sum of the team. Coach Kelly stresses that all the time. You're only as strong as your weakest link. You always hear that. So it's just a total sum of everyone doing the right things together, practicing hard. I feel like every team in the country is trying to practice hard, but working together, taking care of the brotherhood.
And that's a little bit of coach speak. It's not necessarily the most revealing quote you've ever heard, but they do need to be together. And it can be easy for teams to fracture when things aren't going very well, whether that's the offense versus the defense versus the offense, or someone, or just a wedge between the position group. And I think last year, based on the tweets that I was looking at after Matt House and the defensive staff were let go, it would be tough to call that group together. And that's part of this cycle that I always talk about, where confidence springs anew in the spring and builds throughout the summer into camp, because nothing really, really negative happens when you're out at practice. You just blow the whistle and go do it again. Losing a game, giving up a ton of points on national television can cause some people to be emotional and relationships to fracture. And I think it's reasonable to suggest that LSU's defense had its issues with camaraderie late in the season, whether you want to say that's within the confines of the team, or you want to say that was just a team and the coaching staff, or wherever the case may be. It manifested itself when this thing wrapped up. So to go back to Greg Penn, talk about the defense and playing a little bit more quickly.
The defense is flying around, having fun. I see a lot of energy from the guys on defense. Just trying to get better every day, really. I mean, just improving every day as a whole defense and as a team.
Spring is a time for energy, not necessarily a time for I don't want to say demands, but obviously you're not playing games. It's a time for guys to get to know each other. You can make some mistakes. It's not as high stress. It's go out there and play and learn. And it sounds like what Greg Penn is speaking to there. The last bite here is about the biggest question mark probably on this entire team. And that's the interior defensive line and how LSU finds a way with limited numbers right now and limited production returning and a lot of factors stacked against this interior defensive line. What type of improvement are we looking at?
I think Coach Bo's doing a great job. There's a lot of guys in there that are working really well and improving their whole package of their game. Whether it's pass rush, taking on doubles, the single blocks, hitting the gap, like they're all. I see a big improvement from all the guys in there.
Look, Bo Davis is a great coach. He's a great recruiter. He's very respected. He's thought of as a great motivator, and his track record speaks for itself. He's not a magician. So there's going to be some issues on LSU's interior defensive front and really the defensive front as a whole. The question is, how well can you mask them? What can you get out of this team? The ceiling on this LSU defensive front is not very high right now. It's just not. Now, if what you see from Josh Pate and the crew over at 24/7 or some of the, if there's a transfer portal bonanza after spring football is over, I reserve the right to change my judgment. But at this point, right now, with the guys they've got signed and the guys they've got in camp, like, the ceiling is there. What can you get out of it? How close can you get to that? That's just a big question we'll be talking about for the next 3 weeks of spring football, and certainly as we get into August and training camp starts. Just some thoughts from some LSU defensive players, Greg Penn and Paris Shand. Some more to come a little bit later on. We'll pause. Hey, thanks for watching Hunt on LSU. Before you get out of here, do us a couple of favors. Hit that like button, leave your comments below, and subscribe to the channel for all your Fighting Tiger football talk. See you next time.